In a world where debates get more and more polarized, how do we even begin to confront the rise of racism? Well, today we're going to dig into the ideas of a philosopher named Karl-Otto Apel and see how his discourse ethics can actually be a powerful tool for defending democracy. Let's get into it.
I mean, we've all seen this, right? Right-wing slogans that would have been completely shocking just a few years ago are now starting to pop up in everyday conversations. The lines of what's okay to say are getting blurry, debates turn toxic in a heartbeat, and discrimination is on the rise. And it's creating a climate that really threatens the way we all live together.
So faced with all this, you might be wondering, what can philosophy really do about racism? Isn't it just an academic exercise, something for dusty old books? Or can it give us some actual practical tools to fight back? That's exactly the question we're here to answer.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at the crisis in our public debate, then I'll introduce you to Apel's philosophical toolkit, and we'll break down the basic rules of any good argument. From there, we'll see why racism is basically a logical self-contradiction, how we can practically defend democracy, and land on why equality is simply non-negotiable.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the problem at the heart of all this, the crisis that's facing our whole culture of debate. And here's the core idea we're going to explore today. Karl-Otto Apel's discourse ethics gives us a way to show that racist arguments aren't just morally wrong, but that they are fundamentally irrational, that they're logically broken at their very core. It reveals how these narratives are a direct attack on the foundations of democracy itself.
So who was this guy, Karl-Otto Apel? And what exactly is in this philosophical toolkit he's offering us?
Karl-Otto Apel was a major German philosopher after World War II and a key thinker behind discourse ethics. And his big idea was this: morality isn't just about your private feelings or beliefs. It's about how we publicly justify our actions and claims to each other, using reasons.
Now, to really get what he's saying, we need to zoom in on three key concepts. First, presuppositions. These are the unspoken rules we all agree to in any serious argument. Second, the ideal communication community. That's kind of the North Star, the goal of a truly fair debate. And third, co-responsibility. This idea that we all have a shared duty to make that fairness possible. Okay, now we get to the heart of Apel's whole theory. This is where it gets really interesting. What are these unspoken rules that we all implicitly accept the second we start a real argument?
Here's Apel's big aha moment. The instant you try to persuade someone with reasons, instead of, just forcing them, you've already bought into a set of ground rules. And if you break those rules, the whole conversation just falls apart. It's not a real discussion anymore.
And these are the five big ones, the presuppositions. First up, equality. Everyone in the conversation is treated as an equal. Second, reciprocity. This just means your reasons have to make sense and be things others can actually check. Third, inclusion. Everyone who's affected by a decision gets to have a say. Fourth, non-coercion. The best argument wins, not the loudest voice or the biggest threat. And finally, number 5, truthfulness. You can't just knowingly lie, because that destroys any chance of real understanding.
So, you might be asking, where did he pull these rules from? Thin air? Well, not exactly. As Apel himself put it, they're derived from the reflection on the presuppositions of arguing. In other words, they're not something he just made up. They're what you discover when you simply think about what it means to have a real, honest argument in the first place. Okay, so now that we have this framework, we can see with total clarity why racism isn't just immoral. It's actually a logical train wreck. Apel has a name for this, a performative contradiction. Now, that sounds complicated, but the idea is super simple. It's when the act of doing something contradicts what you're actually saying. Think about someone shouting, "I am not speaking right now." The very act of saying it proves it's false, right? And that is the performative contradiction of racism in a nutshell. On the one hand, a person making a racist claim steps into the ring of public debate pretending they want to persuade you with reasons. But on the other hand, their racist action, devaluing other people, denies those very people the right to be equal partners in the debate. It's like they're using the rules of the game just to blow up the whole game board.
And this plays out through a pretty common playbook of rhetorical tricks, right? Complex social problems get blamed on a single scapegoat. People are dehumanized and talked about as floods or masses. A fake state of emergency is declared to justify breaking the rules. A single negative story is used to generalize about an entire group. And of course, rumors and pure disinformation are spread on purpose. These aren't arguments, they're sabotage.
So here's the critical takeaway from all this. From the perspective of discourse ethics, a racist statement isn't just another opinion we have to respect. It's a direct attack on the very foundation that makes a fair exchange of opinions
possible in the first place. It's like throwing sand in the gears of communication itself.
So, what does this actually mean for us? How do we take this theory and use it to defend our democracy in the real world?
Apel wasn't naive. He was a realist. He knew that our real-world conversations are messy. They're full of inequality and power struggles. But, and this is key, he insisted that we need an ideal to aim for, a North Star. And that's his ideal communication community. It's the gold standard we have to measure ourselves against to see where we need to improve.
And Apel just brilliantly summed up our mission here. Our task is to realize the ideal communication community within the real one. Think about that. Fighting racism isn't some niche issue. According to Apel, it's the central, practical, democratic work of dragging our flawed reality closer to that ideal.
So what does that look like in practice? Well, we can pull out at least 6 concrete actions. 1, we have to center and include the voices of those who are actually affected. 2, we've got to consistently enforce the anti-discrimination laws we already have. 3, boost media literacy to fight back against disinformation. 4, address the real social root causes of problems like housing or wages instead of blaming them on ethnic groups. 5, regulate tech platforms so their algorithms don't just amplify hate for profit. And 6, and this is on all of us, we have to clearly and consistently speak out against dehumanizing language wherever we see it.
And all of this brings us to our final, and honestly, our most important point.
The equal worth of every single person. That is not up for negotiation. It's not the result of a democratic debate. It is the absolute precondition for one. Anyone who calls that basic principle into question hasn't just offered a controversial opinion. They've already left the room of reasoned democratic argument.
So what now? It really comes down to this. We have to actively work to repair our public conversations. We need to act in solidarity with people who are being targeted, and we've got to stay curious and keep learning. You know, democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's a daily practice. If you want to dive deeper, here are some excellent resources. Thanks so much for watching.